Viewpoint diversity is arguably the most important type of diversity, and political orientation is one of the most fundamental and significant ways in which people view things differently. Google fires employee behind controversial diversity memo. I don't know why I expected anything different. If you're unfamiliar with the situation surrounding Google and the diversity memo that's supposedly been circulating around the firm, allow me to fill you in real quick. It was written by an engineer working for Google. I'm not going to say his name, but it's pretty easy to find at this point, and it lambasts the politically correct monoculture that pervades the tech company. It covers a lot. After all, it is 10 pages long, so reading through the whole thing would be tedious. Luckily, the author of the document provided a TLDR at the beginning, which sums up his own words quite well. Google's political bias has equated the freedom from offense with psychological safety, but shaming into silence is the antithesis of psychological safety. This silencing has created an ideological echo chamber, where some ideas are too sacred to be honestly discussed. The lack of discussion fosters the most extreme and authoritarian elements of this ideology. Extreme: all disparities in representation are due to oppression. Authoritarian: we should discriminate to correct for this oppression. Differences in distribution of traits between men and women may in part explain why we don't have 50% representation of women in tech and leadership. Discrimination to reach equal representation is unfair, divisive, and bad for business. I read through the entire memo, and for the life of me, I could not figure out why it was causing so much outrage. It was pragmatic and presented its case in a very well thought out and polite way. I'll leave a link to the full memo in the description if you'd like to read it for yourself. This PC culture and suppression of opposing opinions is something that's becoming increasingly prevalent not only in Silicon Valley, where Twitter, YouTube, and other big companies constantly censor anti-PC or conservative viewpoints, but it's happening almost everywhere now. Meritocracy is being thrown out the window on a daily basis in order for companies and colleges to reach diversity quotas so they don't appear racist. Hiring, accepting, and promoting people based on the color of their skin instead of how much they can actually contribute. And this practice has been shown time and time again to negatively impact minority and underrepresented groups, because as you put people in positions they don't have the capacity to fulfill, it tends to discourage them and cause them to drop out at an even higher rate. Google does this too, and as noted in the memo, they have several programs that actively discriminate in order to maintain that standard of diversity. For example, they provide programs, mentoring, and classes only for people with a certain gender or race, a high priority queue and special treatment for diversity candidates, hiring practices which can effectively lower the bar for diversity candidates by decreasing the false negative rate, and reconsidering any set of people if it's not diverse enough, but not showing that same scrutiny in the reverse direction, which is confirmation bias. Google's recently hired head of diversity, which, why is that a thing, sent out her own memo saying that Google is unequivocal in our belief that diversity and inclusion are critical to our success. And the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, also said, to suggest a group of our colleagues have traits that make them less biologically suited to work is offensive and not okay. He also went on to say that it is contrary to our basic values and our code of conduct, which expects each Googler to do their utmost to create a workplace culture that is free of harassment, intimidation, bias, and unlawful discrimination. Except women and men do have traits that make them more and less biologically suited for specific types of work. On average, women tend to be more neurotic with higher anxiety and lower tolerance for stress. Women, on average, are more agreeable and want to appear welcoming and friendly. Men and women's brains are different. Women tend to have predictable IQs closer to the median, while men's IQs tend to be more variable. This is not disputed, guys. It's biology. There is research that backs this. To suggest that men and women are fundamentally the same and are just as capable to fill the same job is inane. But no, let's peddle that misinformation for the sake of putting more women in lab coats on our homepage. Not to mention that Google actually overrepresents women in the tech field. 20% of the company's tech jobs are held by women, while only 18% of all graduates in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in computer science were women. Listen, I'm rambling. The point is, let's not throw biology and basic, observable differences between sexes out the window in favor of diversity. This video that you're watching right now, just like the so-called anti-diversity memo that's circulating Google, is not suggesting we discriminate, but merely suggesting we pick people who are actually qualified for jobs. But no, that's offensive. We can't do that. We have to fire the guy instead, because we only value diversity of skin color and genitals, not ideas. Ironic, isn't it? A guy who writes a memo saying, hey, let's be open to opposing viewpoints instead of suppressing them, is shit-canned for perpetuating gender stereotypes.